The NFL schedule release doesn't matter, and we can prove it. Every year, the NFL makes a spectacle out of releasing every team's schedule order. While every team's opponents are released earlier in the offseason, the actual dates of the games are kept a secret until May, when every team is allowed to drop them all at once on the NFL schedule release date. Some teams, like the Chargers and Titans, make fun videos out of the release, while others just drop them on their social media post. All of the hype around the schedule release had us wondering though, does it really even matter at all? Of course we know the opponents on a schedule matter. That is not what we're talking about here. But what about the other parts that fans and teams focus on? When looking at a schedule, there are typically 3 items that everyone cares about: the strength of schedule, the miles a team has to travel during the season, and when is a team's bye week. But how much of an impact on wins and losses do these 3 categories actually play? Well, we ran the numbers for the last 3 seasons, and what we found proves that their importance is way overblown.
Let's start with the easiest one to disprove, which is strength of schedule. The strength of schedule is a fairly easy metric to figure out. You just take the previous season's win percentage for a team's opponents and find the average. People have been using this metric forever to determine if a team has a tough schedule or not, but when you actually put it to the test, it just does not hold up. We took the 10 teams with the toughest schedules based on this metric and the 10 teams with the easiest over the last 3 seasons and compared their average win percentages. The teams with the toughest schedules had an average win percentage of 50.39 or an average of 8.5 wins a season. The teams with the 10 easiest schedules had an average win percentage of 49.73 or an average of 8.4 wins per season. Yeah, I don't think there are too many teams that are worried about 0.1 losses per season. This one is pretty obvious. Teams change dramatically from year to year, so how a team performs one season has no effect on the next. But the distance traveled should have a larger impact, right?
Unfortunately, the data was pretty limited here. It looks like travel miles, or the total distance each team travels to games in the season, really only started getting tracked in 2021. And in that season, it was only the top 5 and bottom 5 travel teams that were reported on. Still, I believe there's enough data there to draw a plausible answer from. But before we get into all the numbers, I just want to point out a couple of observations we noted. So you would guess that West Coast teams would make up the majority of the top 5 in most travels, and they did. But also, Florida teams appeared almost as much as the California teams. Also, teams that consistently had to travel the least, pretty much the entire AFC and NFC North. They made up the entire list outside of one appearance by the Buffalo Bills in 2021 and the Carolina Panthers appearing on the 2023 list. Anyway, back to the numbers. So the teams who traveled the most had a win average of 0.494, while the teams who traveled the least had a win average of 0.462, a difference of about 30 points or half a game. Honestly, going into this, I thought the difference would have been way higher and benefit teams that traveled less. So to see only half a game difference in favor of teams that traveled more was really surprising. But when you think about it, this actually makes sense. Since the same teams have to travel further distances more often, they have perfected the routine and are more used to the process, while those who have to travel the least could have their routines thrown off whenever they have to deal with a big time zone change. So travel distance is more important than strength of schedule, but travel distance is still not going to make or break your season unless you miss the playoffs by 1 game. So that leaves us with our biggest obstacle, the bye week.
The bye week is looked at as the biggest benefit a team can get. Playoff teams fight for the number 1 seed because it gives them an extra week to rest and recover before the playoffs start. But it's not just about getting an extra bye week that teams care about. They are also particular about when their bye weeks are during the regular season. According to John Breach from CBS Sports, teams seem to prefer a later bye, and there might be a reason for that. Almost every Super Bowl winner for the last 10 seasons has been a team that got a later bye. 5 of the 6 Super Bowl winners since 2017 have had a bye in week 10 or later. If you go back to 2014, 8 of 10 Super Bowl winners have had a bye in week 9 or later. So if the bye week is important enough that can help boost teams to become Super Bowl champions, then it has to play a large effect during the regular season, right?
Well, we looked at all 32 teams' records from the last 3 seasons, organized them based on whether their bye week was in the first 9 weeks or after, then averaged out their win percentage, and what we found was honestly really shocking. Teams with a bye in the first 9 weeks of the season had an average win percentage of .517. Teams with a bye in weeks 10 or later had an average of .482. A difference of only 32 points, or just over half a game a year, in favor of teams that had an early bye, which is very contradictory to the team's idea that a later bye is better. Also, 54% of division winners had an early bye. So why would an earlier bye week be better than a later one?
Well, when you put yourself in these players and coaches' shoes, it makes sense. Yes, the bye is a great time for players to recover with no practices or games that week, but it's also a great time for coaches to stop and reflect on what their team is doing well and what's not working. The NFL season, or honestly any football season, can really feel like a gauntlet where you take on one opponent right after the next with no time to come up for air. Staff spend the majority of their time breaking down the film for next week's opponent and coming up with plays and packages that are designed to attack identified weaknesses. We all know this is a game plan, but building that game plan and putting it into action with the players through the meetings and practice takes the entire week. So there's a little time for self-reflection to identify which players should be benched or which plays or formations should be scrapped from the. Having the early bye allows teams to fix their problems early before they derail an entire season. It doesn't do much good to start making changes when you're already 4-7 and half of your team just got moved at the trade deadline. So what do the numbers tell us then?
Honestly, the results just aren't statistically significant enough to say that a team with a late bye that travels the least and has a weak schedule won't have a better record. So if the schedule release doesn't matter enough for the players and coaches to care, why does the NFL put out so much hype around it? Because it matters to the people the NFL cares the most about. You, the fan. You care about the schedule release because you need to know which days you need to book flights and hotel. You need to know which events you won't be attending in the fall because you'll be glued to the TV. Tell the kids Santa's coming late this year because the NFL scheduled dad's team to play on Christmas morning. The NFL is making a big deal about the schedule release. Also keeps football on your brain longer. It keeps them relevant. And the longer the NFL can stay on your mind, the less likely you are to fall off from one season to the next.
While it can be fun to analyze your favorite team's schedule and worry about bye weeks and travel distance, you should remember that at the end of the day, teams spend a lot of money and time to neutralize as many of these factors as possible. Based on the difference being about one game a season, I would say that they have done a good job of making sure the players and coaches determine the outcome of games and not frequent flyer miles. What you should really be worried about is your wife finding out that you took out a second mortgage to go watch your team play on the weekend of your wedding anniversary. But tell us what you think. Is there another reason the NFL schedule release matters? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to hit that like button and please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, we are the RFL Show.